we have to. Thank you. So, first of all, my name is Marwan, part of the Africa organization. For those of you who have joined us for the first time, Africa is basically the African Network for Artificial Intelligence in Biomedical Imaging. Our main goal is to promote the research in Africa, as well as foster the real-world applications within the African continent. Additionally, we aim to connect stakeholders from Africa and beyond. Every month, we host 2 seminars, and today we are joined with Dr. Anirban and Moritz to navigate you through the social media landscape and help you to promote your research. So let me first give a brief introduction about Dr. Anirban and Moritz. So Moritz is a PhD student at the Technical University of Darmstadt, as well as he holds the vice president in the MICAI student board. Dr. Anirban, on the other side, is a research group leader in the Technical University of Darmstadt, and he hosts the famous AI Ready Healthcare podcast, which is also supported by the MICAI Society. And yeah, thank you for joining us for today, and welcome. And the mic is yours.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Marwan. We're today here to talk about navigating social media landscape. And the first question you might have is, do scientists really need social media? Can't we just stay in our lab and work on our ideas and make fancy soap bubbles out of them and stay there and keep just publishing and don't promote it on social media? Sure, you can, but I'm gonna give you a really good example why it can be beneficial for you. It's really hard to quantify how beneficial, but it's a good example. So the example here is from Anastasios. He published on YouTube during Corona a video, a tutorial on conformal prediction, a thing he's working on and he's really good at. And this tutorial got watched in the last 2 years by 37,000 or almost 38,000 people, which is quite a lot for such a niche topic of a very complex mathematical thingy. While he was already publishing beforehand, you can see in his citation score how much this already boosted other researchers to start in that topic, to apply it to their problem, to their field. In the end, also promoting his research and giving him a lot of citations as a PhD student already. So I think this is a prime example, a good example, what you can achieve with doing social media right and promoting your research or like helping others with social media to understand your stuff. So let's go into what could you all do here. So usually you want to promote your journey, your ideas, your science. That includes things like preprints, but also conferences, journals, and even if you didn't get it to publish before as much, maybe even post-publication after some time you want to reiterate on it. You already have good mechanism in promoting your research at a conference, but you might not have the same attention and people you can explain your work even more in depth if you don't use social media like in journals or like if you only publish a preprint. So I think that in the sense means you kind of need to leverage social media to bring the attention to really good research of yours or really interesting findings you found, so that people read them, see them, and yeah, in the end, maybe this also turns into citations or you get a collaboration out of it. So where can you do this? these are some platforms. There are definitely much more platforms you can use if you want to, but I think for the most applications and promoting your research is actually in Twitter and LinkedIn, where you can promote the latest paper you published, the next talk you're giving on a conference or something like this. You can also use YouTube, as explained before, or if you have stunning visual examples or you work in the biomedical field with really fancy images, you might also go to Instagram, or you start a podcast like Anirban, but he's gonna talk about that later. Um, so before you start, you definitely should look into the social media guidelines of your institution, of your company, of your general university. I have here 3 examples, one from TU Darmstadt, but you find the same for Emory, Stanford. Basically, any research facility has something like this guideline, what you can publish, what you cannot publish. But be aware sometimes if you're like at a university which is quite open of what you can publish on social media and allows you basically to publish everything. There can be also restrictions if you're working within a hospital of that university or some other institution inside that. So that they say, yeah, you cannot post any pictures of patients, even if they're anonymized or something like this. You should not post those pictures online. You basically go with the most restrictive ruling. Another aspect of social media policies comes also to conferences or double-blind review. You should not break that usually. Some conferences allow you to publish it as a preprint, but they don't allow you to post about it in social media. I think the latest one that did that was ICLR last year, but they also moved away from it. For Mikai, you're in a double-blind review, and you cannot post you got accepted about your paper. So, how do you start? How do you start your social media? First, you want to sign up to your social media platform like LinkedIn or Twitter or others, and you want to know the audience you're going to see there, and you also want to know which kind of output you want to become from that. So an example for a scientist that would be quite easy. I want to promote my research so that other people engage with it, they learn something from it, and yeah. Then, when you post, you definitely should know your message of your paper. What is the key insight? What is the main message you want to promote? And you should tell this message tailored to the platform. So, for example, Twitter has a character limit. So you're kind of restricted on how much you can post there. Versus LinkedIn, where you can basically post as much as you want, but you still want to tailor it so that it's easily understandable in a short enough post so that people actually read it. Because if it's just a wall of text, people won't read it. And lastly, you should always evaluate what you're posting, what you're doing on social media from time to time to find what works better, just so you know. It's like a bit like an experiment. So you first put out your model and then you evaluate it later and update it then. So to come to first point, who follows who is your audience? So for most scientists on Twitter, it looks like this, depending on the follower number. They are having mostly other scientists following them, but they also have increasing numbers of public and the media following them that might not have the vocabulary to follow along what you're saying there. So if you have very specific medical imaging terms, you might not like even understand them, or like your audience won't understand them. So you might keep an understanding language to your audience. So now, how do you build your audience on a social media platform? This is going to be a step-by-step guide a bit on how you can build it from the ground up if you don't have a profile. So first you make your profile, you fill in your profile picture, you might have a banner on your profile page, and you write a bio. And then you should start by, follow other scientists, follow people whose papers you read that you found interesting. If you find a good paper, what I often do is I follow the first author and maybe also the last author of that paper to follow along if they're publishing more on the things that is really interesting. Another thing you can do, you can also like follow followers of other followers that are in the same field. They don't need to be directly connected to you. If you see somebody reposting some tweet from somebody else who did something great, you can follow them. You can interact with those posts, like it if you liked it. And with that, you will get back other followers and will build your own audience. Another thing you should do is follow the societies that are integral to the community you want to engage in. So for Mukhopadhyay, this is like the Mukhopadhyay Society account, the Mukhopadhyay Student Board, RISE, WIM, and Mukhopadhyay, and so on. There are many of them. There are also all the workshops. If you want to go to a workshop, you might want to follow the workshop page to get updates on the submission dates and Lastly, things you can follow are also journals, your institution or other institutions that interest you, like big universities. Often if you link your own institution, your own university, they will repost or share your post again, and effectively generating more audience for you, which then also follow back to you in some sense. It's not entirely traceable how this always happens, but it's generally a good idea to do this. So let's get to the second step. That's probably the most important one. You want to tweet or post on those social media platforms just that people have something to read, that they understand what you're actually doing. And before you do this, you always should ask yourself, what is the purpose? What is the message of my post? Is that post necessary? Is it informative? Is it that what I want to put on social media, on the internet, which might not be forgotten ever. So it might stay on there. And if it was something that's maybe inappropriate, that's not a good thing for you usually. Another thing is you should not overwhelm your audience. So don't post 10,000 posts a day because nobody gonna see them. There's basically a limit to how many posts a person can see on a day or like in a week. So they will only see like the best of them on this day. And so make your post one of them, one of the good posts, one of them people want to read. So how do you do this? I think a lot of people who do it the first time struggle a bit with writing. How do I post here? What do I write? What is a good post? And a simple recommendation for the start is use ChatGPT or some similar large language model to write you a first draft. You should definitely refine that draft and yeah, make it your own. Also, sometimes they're not that good. They might miss some important information. They get things wrong. That happens. Um, Also, it's a lot about the prompting. How could you do the prompt to those models? But in the end, those posts are often quite similar. If you have ever done this with ChatGPT, you usually will get a post that says something like explosion, attention, this is new, or something like in the first line. That's usually that giveaway that this post is written by ChatGPT. In a sense, this is not bad. It's actually quite like makes a lot of sense to write this. But in the end, it also makes this post very similar with other posts and very dull, and people will read over it and like skip it basically, and do not engage with it. That's not what you want. So another thing you want to do is definitely use the right hashtags, like hashtag the conference, hashtag the journal, hashtag your institutions. Also tag all the persons that are relevant to your post, like all the authors. If they also have social media, tag your workshop you published in or the conference, something like this. So now you have posted and you keep posting some time, and at some point you ask yourself maybe, could I also post something more personal on my professional account, or vice versa? You already have a quite large following on your personal account. Would it make sense to post something that's professional? You need to find the right balance. If you begin with a professional account, which is the standard for most scientists, then it's the question how much personal life you want to get in there, and you should keep the right balance connected to your research. We're going to have an example for this later on. Else, I would recommend you can also do two accounts, and one you keep for your personal life, and the other one you keep for your professional career. And then you have those audience split, but it also means you have to maintain two accounts. Yeah. One last thing, you don't need to post immediately when you're writing your post. You can also save it as a draft, come back to it, schedule it later. An example, you say, okay, I have written my post, but maybe I want to do a nice image, a nice GIF, or a nice video for it, and I need to still craft that. It's totally fine to save it as a draft, come back later when you have that image, when you have that content, which really would help your post to stand out and be seen by more people. Then that's definitely a feature. It's also a good feature if you're not sure if that post is necessary, if it's appropriate, or you have any doubts about posting it. Save it for later, think a bit about it. You can come back. So the third step is basically engage with communities, engage with your followers, the people who you follow. Basically, you want to listen and learn from them as much as they can learn from you. This will help you to gather new friends, gather new collaborators, to learn something. Maybe you find somebody else also had a problem on a topic like you had when you're implementing something. And you can then write them and ask them how they are going to solve it, and maybe it helps your own research. Then at the same time, you also should stay professional and positive. As I said before, There are countless examples of people posting a bit too edgy or discriminant content and then getting suspended from their university. Those things happen. I strongly advise to not do this. It will stay on the internet forever. Just looked up a few days ago a post, a case that I still remember from 2013 about a guy who posted discriminating content against obese people, and he got suspended for a year for it from his university role. So that's something you definitely shouldn't do. And lastly, there's one thing you can still do. You should analyze your posts. Analyze them. Did they get enough likes? Why didn't they get a broader audience? Was it maybe the wrong time you posted? So usually it's more the evening when you can post, or if you want to also appeal to the American market or the Asian market, the evenings in that time zones, if it's more interesting in there, because the conference is maybe not in that area. For this year, it's in Marrakesh, the Mecca, so posting around, between 5 to 8 p.m. is usually a good time to post, and people look it up. So now we're gonna come to some examples on how you can prepare posts. And this example here is from Harry. He's our current PR officer at the MICA Student Board. And he published his research last year in the Unsure workshop at MICA. And it's about out of distribution detection. That's why he put that hashtag there quite dominantly. And you can also see he includes like the major findings of it and also the link to his papers. Lastly, he also indicates how many sub posts gonna be there, that people that are further interested may start scrolling through them, reading them, and don't miss any of them. One interesting thing he did here is actually putting a GIF, which is an animation of his work and explaining it, which I found a really good way to engage with people. And you can see he got quite a lot of views in that time when he posted it, over 3K views, 47 reshares with only 27 likes. Now, if you analyze this, you could ask yourself, why did this get not that more likes? Why? Yeah. There can be various reasons. It can be that a lot of people get it viewed, but they just scroll over it, they watch the video and then forget to like it. But it can also be other things. So let's go on to a more personalized account story. And this one is actually from Anirban from last week about the Mekkai deadline, submission deadline. And he posted how he does his detox. This is a good way to engage with the community, promoting your science without talking about it, because you can't because of blind review, double blind review. And you can see it already gathered quite some views, and then also other people started engaging with that, like me and Camilla. She posted her birthday cake. I posted my cortado I made myself, and that enhanced the primary post of Anirban and gave it more views, because then the algorithm thinks, yeah, this is a post people want to interact with, and more people get to see it. So now you definitely have gotten to that point, maybe asking how often should you post and how do we keep posting like every day. I don't recommend posting every day. It's definitely good for your social media. Posting every week is already good. Posting every other week maybe a bit too little. But you might not always have something to post. And here we have an example from Chrissy. She is posting about the daily coding work she's doing. She's doing basically 100 days of code. You can see this hashtag here, and every day she's coding on something. She posts an image or some story of that day, what she was doing, what she's currently struggling with. And maybe sometimes even people engage with her and ask a question about it, or also tell her good resources where to look for further inspiration, things like that. And that's an easy way you can do, even if you don't have a published paper, you don't have a preprint or something to talk about. You still can engage in the scientific communication on social media. So now we come a bit more to analytics and also an example on how you can post during conference. So what I like usually to do, this is a poster we had with Yannick. It's my colleague. We had a nice paper together in Mecca last year. Usually we do a post with the person in front of the poster to say that people that are interested in this field might come around that poster to ask him more questions. And what I did then on top of that, I did a repost because I'm a co-author on it, spreading it to my network, basically extending the reach. And only this repost got already 1,000 more impressions that haven't seen it before on his page. So it effectively extended his reach, and you definitely should do this with your supervisor, with your colleagues or your co-authors that are working on this to promote your research, to reshare it. Yeah, it's gonna help. For me, this had already quite sometimes the implications that people that might have missed the main poster session of that paper wrote me on social media, like LinkedIn or Twitter. Could you explain this to me? Would you want to meet somewhere? And then we met in like a coffee break, and we talked about the research, and I could explain further to them. And I think that's a really valuable part where social media plays a good role for scientists. So lastly, we do the same. We can also look at LinkedIn statistics. That looks a bit different. But here you see a post from the Mika student pod where we're looking for new members because we had to fill new 6 rows. And I reposted that with my account on LinkedIn. And you can see we got quite a lot of impressions on that repost of over 2,000, and also the distribution of people that we're looking at and like which kind of companies they are working, but you can also look up other statistics on this. Also here an interesting thing, it may got less likes, less reactions to it than it got impressions, while other posts then get more likes and don't get the impressions. As long as the engagement is high, it's usually going to grow more and more impressions and reach. So that's really good for you. It's just maybe sometimes people didn't like it or it wasn't that interesting. And a repost is definitely a bit harder than an original post. So now you can ask me some open questions on those platforms before we go on to Anirban's part, talking about his podcast and so on.
Thank you a lot, Moritz, for this presentation. Yes, you can, like, for people, like, either unmute yourself or you can drop your question on the chat. For me, to be honest, I have a very like interesting question that I always have thought about. sometimes you get very busy by like your research and your work, and you forget about posting, like your recent work. Uh, what do you suggest if you have, like, I would say, an outdated paper or outdated uh, research that you want to share on the social media? Do you suggest sharing it not at all? Like, is there like a trick for sharing such previous papers? I would say that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get that. So that's exactly that case when it's like post-publication. It's kind of old already. It's maybe never has been published or so, but it at least should be on archive or somewhere. Um, then yeah, you might just go ahead and post about it right now. It doesn't need to be matching to any time frame. You might want to keep the day of time to be a good thingy. You don't want to post in the Friday evening where people usually turn off their stuff. Uh, so that's the thing. So you write your post. If you can connect it to some other papers that are already there, you might also link them and put it in context in your post so that the audience gets, hey, this is a neat detail which I might never have gotten published, which is maybe a bit outdated. Um, Another thing you can also do, you can also, if you have like basic science you want to talk about, you can also make blog posts. Blog posts are just a bit more work, but it's a good way to practice what you have learned and show that you actually can know this stuff and help others to understand it better. Um, it's also a good way to promote your research.
Thank you. Thank you a lot for that saying.
Seems like people are shy as usual whenever there is a virtual meeting. So if you have questions in between, you can also type it in the Zoom chat. You don't have to switch on in your, I don't know, audio, video, etc. That's also a possibility. And if not, then probably Moritz, we can go ahead with my set of slides. And
Yes,
maybe
sure.
people have questions or something that was the end. So I will talk about a bit of the podcast and a general bit of a background of what I think sort of good practices, things that do not work, etc., stuff like that. Fair warning: I'm not an expert in this field, so whatever I say, you have to take with a pinch of salt, because it's some of it is my experience, anecdotal evidence, some of it is fairly what I thought makes most sense, etc., etc. All right. So being said that, I'm in this special situation that I started this podcast 4 years ago. By now, it has 10 seasons. The 10th season went live yesterday, and so it will have, and like I have recorded 70 episodes so far. So in terms of podcast, that's a fairly huge number. Most podcasts do not reach that level, so you can consider that beyond the typical way of talking in social media like Twitter posts, LinkedIn posts, and stuff like that, that Moritz was talking about, blog posts, which are really relevant. But this is a little bit of a different way of approaching this problem of actually talking about science and actually talking about something which really matters to me, to a broader audience, but using a different way of speaking rather than just publishing papers. Um, so, Moritz, if we can go to the next slide. So, what I will talk about first of all is that this is true not only for podcast, but basically for any other forms. And Moritz already hinted about the frequency and stuff like that. But really, what I would also recommend is you have to think long term. So really think about regular update. What is the frequency of regular? That's based on what you think you can sustain. But really think of not the next post, not the 3 posts that you have in mind, but think of 1 year. If it is 3 posts or 2 posts per week, you still have to think of 100 posts, right? Because let's say 50 weeks times 2 posts, that's 100 posts. So really have a fair understanding of what these 100 posts should look like, and really plan accordingly. Otherwise, often what happens is people start with a lot of, how to say, steam, and say, okay, well, I do this, I do that. The first few posts are very detailed, blah blah blah, and then things just fizzle out. So just to give an example that I'm not just preaching something, but I also do practice it. So what you are seeing here on the left are the, like, I omitted the names, but really you are looking at the first 3 seasons, so the first entire year of 21 that I planned for podcasts. So 7 episodes times 3 seasons, 21 episodes, how many people I invited, when the Zoom link, the topic, what would be the title, when the editing was done, when the entire episode goes live. I planned everything. And that is really the level of planning that you should do to actually get, how to say, the most benefit out of it. At least I believe this is, for me, works, because if I put this much work up front, then I make a certain commitment to myself that I stick to it, and then typically I have a more motivation to stick to it because I already put so much effort. Whereas if it is about, I will write about this awesome thing, but one thing, and then I just sort of fizzle out, that doesn't really help. The second thing you have to keep in mind is that, and this is something that I never face a problem, but there are a significant number of people who has this perfectionist mentality, that one post I will put out there, it's a perfect post, and I like it, unless it is perfect, I can't really post it. That's a wrong way to think about it. I would say that, like, think of social media as a skill. And I think I put a picture there about someone, Moritz, if you just go to the next one. Someone, yeah, thanks. So someone practicing piano. But really the point really is, if you think of it as a skill, then you don't put yourself into the pressure of perfectionism. Rather, you keep practicing, and you get better every year, every time, every day you practice. And then, yeah, the practice, like, it's not obvious that you are getting better, but over time it get better if you really put deep practice for 10 hours. And finally, what I would say in terms of regular updates is that you should create some metrics for yourself, not the popular metrics, but really metrics that measure what matters to you, and not try to cheat yourself into believing what works. So what you are looking here, again, I omitted the names, but we are looking at, I think, about last year I looked at all the, like, 50 odd episodes that were out there back then, and the top 15 podcast episodes, and then I looked at the type of title I am using and what is the retention. Now, this is a different way to look at podcasts, because typically people look at how many people are listening to it. But because the AI Ready Healthcare podcast is not really so much driven by, how to say, a quick attention. So it's not a trailer, but it's more like a movie. So I want to really look at podcast episodes and discussions which make people stop and listen for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So median time of 20 minutes are all those which you can see in blue. So if you see here, there are about 6 episodes with really long median time. So that means 50% of those listeners were sticking to 20 plus minutes. And considering my podcast seasons episodes roughly last about 45 minutes, that's a fairly long time. So that's something that I personally consider as very important, that I create content that is not just clickable, that's not clickbait, but something where people feel like they need to listen, and from there they get an understanding, they get a learning, they get the stories of the community that finally comes together into bringing something like a community, a society. And that's why I created that such a measure for myself to see how I am doing. And if you can measure it, then you can get better at the type of title, at the type of content that you want to create to get to maximize that sort of a metric for yourself. And basically, now the second set of things that I have are basically the common reasons of failure in social media, but also in podcasts. So the first thing of failure is uh, procrastination. And typically people are saying that, oh, I'm so busy, my schedule is so full, I can't really do it. And then, for a fact, a lot of you are basically surely spending time either doom scrolling or looking at YouTube videos, thinking that this is something where I'm learning, so it's machine learning street talk or some coding blah 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 or something. So you are giving an excuse to your head that by looking at this, watching at these videos, I'm learning. But it's probably not the best way to spend your time. And the idea there would be to sort of, typically such a behavior happens often. So if you can track the trigger of what leads to such a behavior, then you can probably replace it with something which is a bit more engaging, a bit more creative, that brings a lot of value in the longer run. So really, if you are mindful, you can catch procrastination and get better at it. I personally had a lot of trouble watching random YouTube videos about football strategies. And I still enjoy watching football strategies, but I figured out ways of catching myself of football strategies, etc. And I put myself now into a strict routine that every time I look at a YouTube video, in the name that I'm learning from something, I have to note down uh, pen and paper what I'm learning. And if I'm not doing it, then I stop that YouTube video. So that's my way of building a defense against a bad habit that comes with a good excuse. The second thing is about bad planning and execution, that comes hand in hand. And like I gave a picture of, like, okay, this is often something that happens with the new year resolution. We hit the gym, we drink less, we get better overall physical health, etc. And then how that sort of ends up. So missing some days is okay, but really abandoning the plan of what you are committing to is a problem. So when I'm talking about really detailed plan of the year and putting the hard work at the start about anything that you want to do, be it blog posts, regular LinkedIn posts, Twitter, podcast, it doesn't matter. Really think in terms of resource that you need to commit for the entire year, so that you can produce regularly, no matter what excuses are there to stop you from producing it. And if you really do that, and if you plan well, then the type of resource. So it can be time, it can be money. So for the first 2 years of my podcast, there was no support at all, so I had to pay money from my pocket to keep it going. And it well, it needs significant amount of financial resource. So unless you plan properly, unless you know the type of resources, be it time, be it financial, that you need to put into, you really don't know where it's going, and you might have an eye-popping number that will discourage you to actually bring it forward. But really, then it's like a lot of false starts that leads to nowhere. And finally, when you are looking at social media, be it podcast, be it the Twitter or LinkedIn, you will see the influencers, right? And influencers have these eye-popping statistics, and that might discourage you because you posted 3 posts or 5 podcast episodes and very few people are listening to you. The problem really is, even though to the consumers it's instant gratification, the social media, but those who produce, it's a very very delayed gratification. So just to give you an understanding, like, you probably, a lot of you are familiar with the famous podcast from Lex Friedman. So Lex Friedman podcast is something that is like quite well followed. I think it now has about 5 million followers or something like that in Twitter, in YouTube. But if you really look at it, you will see that he has 400 plus episodes, each of 3 hours approximately long. So that's the amount of content he has produced for over a decade or so. Whereas if you just compare it to ARD Healthcare, which is still big, but if you are really thinking of the content, I produce 70 episodes each with 45 minutes long. So it's absolutely nonsense to compare the amount of people who are engaging with the content without actually putting the effort, the hard work of generating that much content, that much high quality content. And once you know that the more content you produce, it's definitely not linear, and it gets better significantly the more unique and the more amount of content that you have. So that's something that is of a very delayed gratification that you have to adjust yourself. And I have one sort of last slide that is there. And yeah, it's basically coming from again from football, and in an interview where Cristiano Ronaldo, CR7, he was talking about, I don't know, probably most of you are not old enough to remember, there was a very phenomenal striker called Ruud van Nistelrooy, and he was talking about Ruud van Nistelrooy, and he said that one of the things that this striker taught him is that number of goals are like ketchup. So you keep shaking the ketchup bottle and nothing appears, and suddenly a lot of ketchup appears. So it's social media is kind of like that. So I would really say concentrate on the dish and keep shaking, and hopefully things will work out for you as well. That's it from my side. Thanks for your attention. And if you have questions, discussions, comments, please either you can open up, I don't know, the video, or just write it in the chat.
Thank you a lot, Dr. Anirban, for this inspiring presentation. And it's very inspiring, actually, like through the podcast and everything. From my side, to be honest, I don't have questions, but if anyone would love to ask a question, we can take it.
It's totally fine if you don't have a question. You don't have to ask one, but it's just something. I mean, it's not like we are experts, right? So we are not talking about our research, of which we have some, how to say, years of expertise. This is something that we are just doing, and these are purely things that we saw kinda works in a very stochastic manner in our setting. So that's what we are sharing. So it's not something beyond that.
Someone is like to ask a question? Yeah.
Hello. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the very insightful presentation, as well as the previous speaker. So I have a quick question. It's really about what looks like a balance and how much effort is sufficient effort. But I do know that cases can be very different. So on one side, I quite understand that it's good to keep pushing, right? But in the event that there is a fundamental, maybe there is a fundamental limitation in the niche or whatever might be the case, right? Which may mean someone has to drastically change direction or perhaps change strategy. Where is the line? How do one actually get to know that, look, this is not, I would give a clear example from the ketchup. If the ketchup is actually finished, it doesn't matter if you keep shaking it, right?
Yeah, you have
Sorry,
made
but
a very
I
good
just
point.
um, so
Yeah, so I
it
really hope
okay.
that
Thank you.
for all of you, it's a great point, but all of you are, I believe, early career PhDs, so it would be a very bleak future if all of your ketchups are already finished. I really hope that's not the case. Then Mika is in a very, very bleak place. But to be honest, you have made a great point that what is the amount of effort versus what is the outcome that you are expected. So again, there is no easy way to answer it, but I sort of think it is that as the following way. So first is, if you consider yourself as a career scientist, as a professional, then scientist has two part. One is the uh, actual research that you are doing, and the other one is the communication. So publication, peer-reviewed publication, I consider as just one form of communication. Yes, this is the biggest currency for building your building your academic ladder and growing up, but this is just one form. There are many other forms. So the blog posts or the LinkedIn posts that Moritz was talking about, or the podcast I'm talking about. So if you really have something to say, you have to consider other forms of communication. The problem really is that the university teaches you, the PhD curriculum teaches you how to be very good at one form of communication, which is the peer-reviewed publication, and rest you are not taught. So I don't believe anyone here has the problem of actually not having any sauce. If at all, maybe the problem is that the bottle is not transparent and you are not seeing through how much sauce you actually have, and maybe you have shaken a few times, and since nothing came out, you might be thinking that the bottle is empty, but that might not be the case at all. So that would be my take, Moritz.
Yeah, thank you very much for your response.
Yeah, very similar. I would just say, just do a little. It's not, you don't have to start a podcast. You don't have to record a full video and do the editing on everything. That's quite advanced, actually. I rather would recommend start on one or two platforms, quite small, just doing regular posts and updates. Get a feel for it and keep doing this. It's actually not that much effort you have to put there. Like writing a Twitter post of less than 144 characters is quite quickly done, That's also kind of the appeal of the platform. If you move on to more complex science communication, yeah, then definitely it's maybe hard to judge at some point, but in the end, you know what you have in the basket in the sense of like what kind of content you have, how important your message is. So it's like a glass bottle on the ketchup. So you kind of can see when it's empty if you don't have anything to say. Yeah. Great question.
Yeah, indeed. I agree. This was a very, very important question to ask. And yeah, there are no clean, easy answer to it. But I guess, yeah. Seems like there are no further questions.
If there's no further questions, we would like to thank you a lot, Dr. Anirban and Moritz, and we are glad to have you on board. I would say thank you and hope to meet you soon.
Absolutely. Hope to see you all in Mikai in